Hey everybody, I think it's just about time. Well, Roger and I don't even live in the same city anymore, but we're still colleagues out there as mystics in the field, being of service to the uplifting of humanity. And we are so jazzed that you're choosing to be on here with us and choosing to view this if you aren't able to attend it live. So I thought it would be really nice if we started with just a little introduction of ourselves, since some people probably know you and not me, or me and not you. You want to go first?
Okay, so I'm Roger Woolsey. I'm a United Methodist pastor. I've served churches in Minnesota, Iowa, and Colorado. I've also become a writer and involved in the movement that's been known as progressive Christianity, which isn't really about politics. It's a certain theological approach. And as I've deepened into that, it's moved gradually from a cerebral place more toward a heart place. And that has led to a lot of inner work, more contemplative approach, gradually more embodied, and frankly less cerebral and less about knowing and more about being. And I'm a work in progress, and the new book that I'm working on reflects that very much. So those are some things to share, I guess, about who I am and what I'm about.
Great, thanks. And I am Kimberly Braun. I'm an ordained minister as well. My path and journey in awakening really was quite alive when I was little, and found myself in very many timeless moments within my family relationships, school relationships, nature, and sacrament. We grew up as charismatic Catholics, so ritual and sacrament were very alive for me and very formative in my being open to the other parts of my life, being an encounter with God. And over time, that's really evolved. After spending close to 11 years as a Carmelite nun, which was not so much a decision towards something, but rather a response to the love already happening within me. I've now been of service out in the world and continuing my own mystic path in very non-defined ways, and yet with even greater penetrating specificity. So, poet, mystic, retreat leader, hopefully an inspirational speaker, hopefully a friend to others on the journey. And right now, in focus, in light of this topic, I am finishing up my second book, just like Roger is. So afterwards, you'll be able to know how you can connect with either one of us. But right now, we wanted to really jump into the topic, which is writing, a labor of love. I think it all starts with inspiration, right? You can't devote yourself to being a labor of love if you're not inspired. So we thought maybe we would share what's inspired these projects, because our projects are compatible but pretty different as well.
Yep.
So go for it.
So you're inviting me to share what's
I'm inviting you to share what inspired your project.
All right, so I'll put it like this. So I'm currently serving on the western slope of Colorado in Grand Junction area. But prior to that, for 14 years, I was the director of the campus ministry, the Wesley Foundation campus ministry at CU Boulder. Boulder, Colorado is got a reputation of being secular, spiritual but not religious. A whole lot of folks who imbibe in marijuana and all sorts of drugs. A lot of folks that are regulars at Burning Man. It's diverse, but there's some stereotypes. And over the 14 years that I lived there, I gradually got to know people in these different groups and subgroups and experienced things along with them, and realized that spirit is very much at work in the spiritual practices of people who don't identify as religious, but rather as spiritual but not religious. And there's a lot of them who have some allergy and reservation and wariness about organized religion, maybe Christianity in specific. And there are life-giving practices that I know about from the Christian tradition, fasting, Lectio Divina, centering prayer, labyrinth walking, even dream work, and things that have really been transformative for me. And it made me sad to realize they weren't aware of those things or not interested in those things. And I realized that over those 14 years, I've become uniquely positioned to be a bridge, an ambassador to both realms, to help each side realize that spirit is in fact at work in life-giving, transformative ways in practices that different folks are doing. And I'm not saying people need to do these things of the other group, but I can help them learn from my experience with all of these practices and share how they've been a part of my healing journey and been transformative in my life. So what inspired it was, well, my own wounding story, my own healing story, and how these practices have been a part of that. And then also this awareness that there are people who, I would say, unnecessarily have wariness or allergy about the other. And if with some information, with some trust and rapport and story sharing, things can soften and shift. So that's the inspiration of the book.
That sounds like a great inspiration, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So what's similar in the inspiration of writing my book to Roger is it's based on experience and growth that has involved healing and expansion. So that definitely is one of the foundations for my inspiration. My book, I wrote it a number of years back, and it wasn't time to edit it and wasn't time to bring it back in the world, uses a historical moment that was very powerful. And that's really the setup. And part of my inspiration is that the historical setup is really worthy of celebration, period. Even if you don't go deeper, it's really worthy to recount the remarkable event that happened. And that event was when I was 29. I was part of a new community of Carmelite nuns down in Texas, and we were small. There were only 5 of us, and there was an incredible download and call to build our permanent monastery. And it's a really powerful story, not just for me, it is of me as well, because when I heard build the permanent monastery, if you watch my TED Talk, when I heard it, I in no way assumed that meant you build the permanent monastery. When I gave that big yes, I thought it meant we collectively were going to build the permanent monastery. And that was a we all along the way. But I did not realize I was going to be the general contractor, principal fundraiser, and one of the main designers and in close relationship with the architects. So it took me on a personal journey that tapped into places within myself that I didn't even know existed. And that capability, that capacity to be an instrument of spirit came about, I believe, because my surrender into monastic life was so wholehearted that there was a certain innocence and purity that my faculties had moved into, a receptivity that was my daily life, that was a setup for being capable of doing what you would think you'd have to know a lot. And this knowing can be helpful in some ways, but it wouldn't have been helpful in this case. So that whole setup and the hundreds of people that gave, we had salt of the earth people donating drywalling days, donating painting days, donating the rebar that they had stacked in their place, donating dynamiting for the septic system, donating stained glass windows, donating the stone on their property, donating their volunteer hours to drive us. It's this amazing tapestry of what happens when the collective is inspired. So I really wanted to recount the story, and I'm the only memory keeper as the main principal on the project. I've still even got the blueprints. But in the process of that experience, what was unearthed within me and in the community, and even now over this 20 years of my being in ministry service, was all the deeper levels, the collective consciousness, the places within humanity where we're really open to the light and the miracle of life, and places where we're wounded and we set up defenses and what you might call darkness, though I don't like that word, where we are suspicious of great things happening. This hit all the community, all of these layers, and there's a lot to unearth there. I was within a very, very conservative structure that looked at spirituality in a very black and white way, and yet this project couldn't fit within that construct. It couldn't happen within this right and wrong, good and bad, black and white way, because it was blowing up all the normal ways that we accomplish things in this three-dimensional world. And my book is hopefully going to be a source of encouragement in the face of humanity in its own evolutionary process. It's not an analysis, it's more an immersion, and hopefully where you'll find yourself in relation to all of these themes as well. So it's my inspiration and aspiration. So we came up with the title Labor of Love. Why? Why is it a labor of love on Labor Day?
Yeah, so if any of you have been artists or songwriters, musicians, authors, there is a way that you know that at a certain point you can sort of tap into the muse, or the muse taps into you, and in a way you feel a little possessed, that you've been infused by something outside yourself is what it feels like. And it could be quite true, actually. And that creative genesis needs to be expressed, and it needs to come out. You can postpone it, you can resist it, but basically it really wants to come out. And it's like a bit, I suppose, being pregnant, being great with child. You've got this this creativity, this newness that needs to come forth, and the work is involved in getting it out into the world. That's the labor process. And like giving birth, there may be some struggles, some yelps, some messiness, but generally it's well worth it, and everyone's oohs and ahs about this new creative birth, this presence in the world. So it's just also fun to work with that concept on Labor Day, which is remembering a very different kind of thing, but a lot of creative hard work needed to bring about not just this 4-day weekend, but the labor movement and collective bargaining and all the good things that we know that did not just happen because it was a good idea and someone wrote it down and that just happened. No, it was a lot of work and a lot of sacrifice, a lot of people's lives, and really all in to make it happen. A bit like the artistic process, the writing process. I sometimes think of British Prime Minister Winston Churchill. I'm going to butcher the quote. It's something to the effect of writing a book. First it's a mistress, and then it's a master, and then it's all-consuming, and finally, just when you can't stand it anymore, you stab it with a fork and fling it out to the public and be done with it. That's a fun way of capturing the angst, the struggle, that's involved. Writing a book, yours is around 480 pages. My last book was maybe 385 pages. This new one, I haven't done the math on it yet. I think it's going to be less, maybe in the 200-page zone. But because it's less cerebral and talking about a theological approach like the last book, and it's more my healing journey, those pages that are less are harder to come out because I'm sharing raw, vulnerable transformation and shift and struggle and So even though the pages are less, the effort into them seems to be more. So that's a start of answering that question of how it's a labor of love.
Thank you. That's cool. I can totally relate to that.
Yeah.
And you know, as I was reflecting when we chose this question, there is, in addition to the things that Roger said, which I can relate to, it's also a labor of love because I have waited a long time to edit this book. And the reason I've waited is because I have been very concerned to stay true to the integrity of the message. And I can't control a reader's response to anything. So it's not an attempt to force upon anybody that's reading the book a certain experience. But I wanted to be sure because it was all of me that was part of this project. It was all of me and all my faculties, but all of me as a solemn vow. That's Vows for Life Carmelite Nun. I gave all of me in this answer of the call. And through that entire process was the tilling of the soils that set up my next step, which, surprising to me, was leaving. So the message is so laden with so much. I've been concerned with valid questions like, am I at a place where I am healed enough of my various levels of grief, where I've moved through things enough that what I know to be true, that everything is grace, what I know to be true, that I'm able to communicate it, that my words are really aligned with that in me, just for my sake. So my labor has been, first of all, to set it aside, because in the first writing of the rough draft, it's a complete outpouring, uncensored. Everything that moved within me is all down there on the page. But that's not meant to go forward out into the world in that shape and in that form. So the labor of love for me is staying constantly looking within in my process. Am I staying true to the real message? Am I staying true to the real message? To be sure, because it's really dancing in realms where there's a lot of division, religion and spirituality. I'm sure if you're watching this, you either have been or know of someone that has experienced tragic harm to their hearts because of their own ascent into or involvement with religion on any level. Whether it was somebody you trusted betraying that trust, whether it was a destruction of a belief that you used to think was true and you find it's not true, you have had your own experience there. So I'm entering into realms that are similar to Roger's, but a different entry point, that are fraught with a lot of division, especially in the wounded Western psyche, of which we're a part. And we're still groaning with our birthing pains around that. So that's a way it's a labor of love for me. Yeah. And a lot of times when people want to hear things about writing, they're real curious about process, right? It's so easy to get inspired about writing a book. And Roger was even joking last night, and I've had this thought, like, why another book? Like, there's a million books out there. There's tons of writing. There's tons of videos. Why another book? And how do you stay faithful to that process? And what's the process really about? So.
Yeah. Okay, so my last book took 3 years to write. The first 2 of those 3 years, I was only writing in the summers because the summers in that mode of my life were a lot less demanding, working with the academics calendar of the CU university schedule. But the third year, I pretty much was in like a luge ride. I had to write every day for a year, and I did. That process, in a way, estranged me from my son. He made me promise not to write another book while I was raising him, and he's now in his last year of college, and I'm now writing. The process of writing actually started when he went to start university in Iowa at Graceland University. I moved to Iowa City, specifically to write. I took some savings, and I was going to take a year off and write this book that I'm working on now, and it's 3 years later. And I went there because the weather's crappy, pretty much October through April, pretty predictably, favorable conditions to stay inside and write. A lot less going on compared to my life in Boulder, less distraction. And while it was a good start on the book, life happened. My mother was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Being in Iowa City, I was able to zip up the road to St. Paul and tend to her and be available as a son in a lot of ways. A lot of video recording, interviewing of mom for posterity in her last year, learning some stories, a lot of which explains more to my healing journey, even generational kind of trauma and stuff. And then since she died, I've learned even more in the last 2 years, including just this past March, some information from my father. So the book, frankly, could not have been completed. I didn't have enough information. It wasn't all available. And so I got as far as I could. I took a job back here in Colorado and have been plugging away. Time has been hard. I actually have 2 jobs, and trying to write in the midst of that is really challenging. So this past July, I got permission from both employers, and I took the entire month of July off. I went to a retreat center in Costa Rica during the beginning of their rainy seasons. Again, favorable conditions, stay inside, write every day. And I did. I got a lot done. I wrote most of the book while I was in Costa Rica that month. It's now been a month since then, and the book still isn't done, but it's in the home stretch. Potentially, the whole book could be done by today, this day, next week. So a week from today, the writing, I think, can be done. I think it will be. Then there's going to be some editing and getting it off to a publisher and what have you. So part of it is life events showing up and being, now is the time, now is not, now is the time, now is not, and creating time as best you can in your circumstance. That's a fair bit to say about the last book and this current book and what it's taken to get it to where it is now. Yeah. How about yourself?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. It's such a great question because we're all so different, and I don't think that there's a particular method that is a cookie cutter. I know there's lots of books out there that can be helpful in stepping into the process of writing, and here we're talking about writing a book. And what I do think is universal, though, is a quote that I've quoted so many times over the years. I saw it in 2007 in a yoga studio, and it's in the bathroom. It was a little plaque in the bathroom. I was teaching meditation there, and I was there all the time. Great community down in Sarasota, Florida. And Garden of the Heart Yoga, if you happen to be watching this. And the quote was, "Discipline is simply remembering what you want." So when I sit with that in relation to this project, there is what I want is to answer what I sense to be a call to write about all of what I just shared in my reason for writing this book. And with that is this dance, this is for me, this dance of having a response to the call that shows up as intuitive goals. So I am not the type of personality where I flourish if I get very, very strict on my time. If I were to sit down and say, okay, I'm going to do this, and this, what would happen within me, within my spirit, is I would feel contracted. But if you know me, I'm a huge manifester and producer. I mean, I'm constantly doing deadlines and producing new projects and people think I'm all very meticulous with my calendar going like this. I'm like, if I did that, I would like suffocate. I would feel completely like somebody dumped, dirt on me and all my fire was gone. But if I stay close to the response and follow it with the intuitive goals, that gets me into the process and keeps me faithful to the process. So when I first wrote the entire manuscript in 2014, what happened is I was doing a soul writing, 30-day soul writing, and within it emerged the knowing, now's the time to write. And when I really acknowledged that deeply, all my life lined up for it. I was an entrepreneur, but I had 4 women's groups that I was leading that were international, and they provided the space and the revenue that I didn't need to take on any other work. So what I did is I started, other than working with these groups, I started every day. I got up, I went to the coffee shop that I wrote most of the manuscript at. I sat there till they closed 10 p.m. day after day, like 14, 16 hours, because it was gushing out of me, because the intuitive response and goal was that now is the time. I had a feeling I would end on March 25th, which is the Feast of the Annunciation, which was my feast day as a Carmelite. I ended at noon on March 24th, set the pen down, and I had a manuscript of 608 pages. So I knew it was going to break into 3 books. I moved out to Colorado, and I didn't know what the process would be to move forward, and things moved very, very fast for me. I'll bypass that first book, but within a year, I was on a national book tour with 80 stops. The book could use a really good edit. It's not my finest literary work, but the substance and the essence is there. And the real purpose of that first book was not to be meticulous on the perfect book, but was to get that message out and to be on the road. This second process, how I am managing this, so for me needing to set it aside, first was my readiness to write it, but second was not so much time, but economy. I just couldn't afford to take the time that I needed for my process. I was on the road traveling in the wake of the first book tour, so I was traveling 8 months out of the year. No space, no stability, and that was my economy. That's how I was making my money, so I couldn't not do that. And then, as many of you know, I started working with the homeless. Well, I was working 50, 60 hours a week. There was no space and no time, and that book sat on my table, literally on my table in my apartment, and I was unable to touch it. So now things have opened up in such a way where I'm able to keep my economic needs very, very, very low to match what's coming in and what I'm needing to spend to survive. And I can give myself the space. It's the space. It's the going to a coffee shop and not having my plan. I don't have a working title because that'll come at the end. I haven't outlined the chapters, but I'm in it. And I'm now up to about page 280 of the 470. So I think in about 6 weeks, I'll have the edit done and it can go on to the professional editor or publisher. But it's the space to stay faithful and to remember what it is that I want, what the divine in me wants. That's my process, what the divine in me wants.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. You used the word call in there at one point. And the last book I felt a calling to write. And this book I also feel a calling, a divine calling. That I there's, in some ways I'm just a regular guy, a regular pastor. In some ways I've had some unique experiences that have allowed me to see a whole and connect dots in ways that maybe others might not be so readily able to do or prone to do. Well, I am. And it feels between my gift of writing and my experiences, God is saying, yeah, now get out there and put those together and bring this into the world. And it's not just for me to have another book out there with the name Roger Woolsey on it or something. It's even if it was a pseudonym, Bob Smith, it doesn't matter my name, but the content of the book needs to be out there to help, I frankly think, the world, to help people be more open to a variety of spiritual practices, to more open to how spirit's at work in their lives, more open to connecting to, frankly, nature, which we all need to do so that we can be more attuned to nature, the planet, and increase our give a damn about caring for this planet. So in a way, the book, it isn't really about saving the planet, but it actually has that potential impact of fostering more people caring about this planet, caring about themselves, caring about each other, and not just humans, but the whole. And so it really feels like, my gosh, this does need to get out. And in a way, it's dropping a rock in the pond of life that could actually help that pond's health. So I can't not write this. I cannot not finish this. It has to happen. So yeah, there's a sense of urgency in a way. Like, yeah, this has to get out there. And sure, in a humble perspective, there's a whole lot of people who think their book has to be out there. And they all do. There's room for it all, and they all matter.
Right.
And if you're listening and you're a writer, and you're maybe just, are you sure your book is worthy, your idea is worthy? Yeah, it is. Get it out there. It matters. And let's learn from each other and compare notes. That's what we get to do in this life. Why keep it all hidden? Let's get it out and have the conversations.
And it sounds like what you're saying that I can relate to as well is that the service is helping to dissolve the sense of taboo around having these discussions. I think that we have a collective conscious enculturation that our throats get tied up if we speak in realms that might not be according to the approved belief system of the collective. And there can be fear of the ramifications. There can be fear that we're going to be excommunicated or ostracized. Or there can be fear that we'll find ourselves very, very alone. But I think we find that when we actually do speak, that the speaking itself, because we're speaking about something so sublime as the larger movement of spirit in creation, that the speaking itself returns to us like Isaiah. I will speak, I will release my word, and it will not return to me void, but it will accomplish everything for which it was sent. And this is using the concept word. So when we let ourselves speak a word that's connected from our deep, essential inquiry, even if it's a word that we know we don't have clarity on, that we may have confusion about, that we may have doubts, that we may have wondering why we're saying it or what we're looking for, even if we're not clear, the speaking itself lets spirit shake it up to reveal these realms of freedom and truth that we're meant to live in.
I'm just taking in your words right now, like, yes, bring more. I'm finding myself really like echoing, like when that little tuning fork gets the other tuning fork to, like, oh yeah, we're both vibrating, it's good. So I'm remembering theologically from the Christian mythos, that story, the divine speaks creation into being. And so we are imbued with the imago Dei, the image of God in all of us. And so how is it that we are the image of God? It isn't our elbows and our beards or lack of hair or whatever. It's not that. It's our ability to love and to be creative. That's really what the imago Dei is, creativity and love. And so, we are following, the apples falling from the tree, and we get to also speak our creativity into being. And then what you were saying about, I'm not so sure. Well, I'm an extrovert, Enneagram 7. Those personality types, in a way, we figure out what we think about something by talking about it. We actually talk about it, and as we're talking or writing, we actually come to where we are, what we believe, and what is true. So in my case, the writing, I don't even know what I'm going to say at the moment until I start typing. And then it just sort of comes out and like, oh yeah, that's right. And I say And whether it's a poem or a book or a blog, I basically continually say what I need to hear. What is it that I need to hear? What would help me in life in this moment? And very often what I need to hear, other people need to hear too. And so that's the beauty of the process. And so I share what I need to hear. Oh yeah, put it out there, and others vibe with it too. And not all people, but many. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And to kind of continue on that same track around expression, I think that in iconography, in a lot of, I'll speak to Christianity, I won't speak to another tradition right now, but if you look at iconography, you oftentimes have this image that to be humble is to be like this. Right? You get those images like, oh, that person's humble, they're silent, they're taken in, their gaze is down. And there's a beauty in being silent before the ineffable. There is a power there that really opens us up to the experience in that kind of silence. But the unfortunate thing I find with the Western mind is it tends to move in the black and white. It tends to then take that completely out of context to the beauty and the power of being silent in the face of being undone by the beloved, and say, and that's holy and everything else is not. So if you're actually expressive, you're more likely to be showy, needing attention, maybe a little arrogant, maybe a little self-seeking, but it's not true. Wow, how many people in our culture are working so hard to free up their ability to express because they have been either explicitly or implicitly impressed with the idea that you have to be very wary of using your voice. And even when you use it, you have to be very certain that what you say is fitting within these kind of very narrow ideas. But what if we could be like nature? What if we could be crazy, wild, expressive, like those flowers that just bloom, and they're blooming in every direction, and they're not like, well, I can't quite put my petals this way, but they're just like letting it all out. No one would say that a flower is arrogant for blooming or releasing its fragrance. So too for us in the expressive process on all levels, on all levels. And but this might be a good time, because I can see that more people have jumped on, for us to give a little snippet or reminder of what our book is actually about, like the elevator pitch. So if you had to say it in like a couple sentences, what's your book?
Yeah.
What's your book about? Because it's going to be coming out next year.
So this new book is called Discovering Fire, and it pulls from Teilhard de Chardin, one of something he said in the Divine Milieu. He talks about how when humans tap into and harness the powers of love, they will have discovered fire again. And so I'm running with that as the theme of the book. And all these spiritual practices, from the conventional organized religious world to the spiritual but not religious realms, are basically fires, and how those fires have enlivened me and helped set me ablaze. And so it's basically a spiritual memoir. It's a healing journey. It's a spiritual practice show and tell. And it's a bridge between the conventional religious world and the spiritual but not religious world. For those that are in the know, it's Richard Rohr meets Russell Brand, or it's Iona meets Burning Man. So there's my book.
That's great. That is going to be, I'm going to look forward to reading that. So mine is something of a spiritual memoir as well, but my themes are all about breaking open the layers of collective consciousness that are groaning and desiring to evolve, to come into fullness of form. It uses the framework of my having, as a 29-year-old Carmelite nun, of having built a monastery with no money and no experience, ending debt-free, valuing $9 million, and a 17,000 square foot facility where we even brought in the 3-phase line power and dynamited for the septic. Like, that's how much there was nothing on the land. So it's the miracle of that project the tapping of the potential that I didn't know was within me, and the representation that is for all of us. I'm not unique. I'm not unique. You have potential beyond your wildest imaginings within you. But within that realization process, we find that in our world, in creation, there are all sorts of limiting structures and beliefs and challenges that get hit and triggered within us, within the community, within the belief systems. And this is going to speak a word of encouragement within all of that, so that we can be beings of compassion and come together instead of forming bigger divisions and pointing fingers. So that's a bit of mine. And we just have one last question that we thought would be relevant, and we've kind of both spoken to it a bit, but maybe we could be more specific. What service? So we're both ministers, and being of service is the second side of the coin of answering the call. The call is its own fulfillment, but part of the answering of the call is this overflow of service to humanity in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, so this book, I spoke to it some already, but basically there's this notion, to whom much has been given, much is expected. And I've been given a beautiful life of much exposure and experience with lots of traditions and practices, and they're all beautiful and good. And I know that there are people who don't know about these things, at least not all of them. And so it would be, in a way, selfish of me to not share what I know with others. If I know something is good and transformative and I don't share about it, that's sort of a hoarding. I can't do that. I have to let people know the good things that are out there and available, and to add my voice and share how those things, I understand them and how they made a difference in my life, makes it more accessible for people to try it out for themselves. And again, I ultimately, we are in a context where we are increasingly on a planet moving toward a disaster situation. We need all hands on deck and to make some major changes for this planet to be sustainable. We really do. And so a lot of us are just sort of numbing out, watching TV, going about our lives, while the Titanic is hitting the iceberg and getting ready to sink. Like, we've got to do something. So I'm adding this book to help more people tap into healing from the divine. And as we heal, and part of that is experience in nature and letting God love us through nature, increasing our love for this planet is a big part of what the book does. It's sort of an unspoken sub-thread throughout the book. And my hope is that more people who read the book will love themselves, love fellow humans, love all creation, and have that shift toward actually moving collectively towards all the hard work that needs to be done for this planet to be sustainable. So it sounds like, my gosh, this book is going to save the planet. Well, we all get to do our work toward that. And I only have so many more years left on this planet, who knows how many more. I can't help but to drop my rock in the pond and make a difference. So
yeah, thank you. I love that. Drop my rock in the pond and see it ripple out. Yeah, how wonderful. Thank you. I have many different answers to this question of how do I see it of service to the world. One answer is that I have experienced all my life being pursued by the beloved. For me, my catchphrase, my word, if you will, of the ineffable source, the life force, the spirit, that in which we live and move and have our being, that in which all creation is coming into form as. So all of that, pretty much my concept word for that really alights my heart and soul is beloved. And I have found myself really pursued by this beloved from my earliest recollections, which forms for me a cosmology of a belief that the beloved is coming into the fullness of form. There's a great book, The 10 Great Cosmic Powers, and it is laying out the 10 actually feminine spanda. It's a tantric book. So the spanda is the feminine principle, which is the creative. Shakti is too small of a word for that, but the creative element in form, imbued with the fullness of the ineffable. And in chapter 3 is the divine desiring. And that divine desiring is the essential igniting force as the center point of all created things, whether it's this pattern that we call Roger, whether it's this pattern, whether it's the land that we stand on, whether it's a flower that we look at. There's something of a center point that is not physical, that is the divine desiring to come into form. And that leads me writing this book, partly in the mystery of, I know it's going to be of service and I'm ready for that ride, but I don't know what that service specifically is. I do know it's going to be like a gushing water that kind of reaches into nooks and crannies that I hadn't imagined and calls me in to be a friend in those situations as a minister and someone whose life is given for these things. And in other ways, I hope that it will be an opportunity for each person that chooses to read it to experience the beloved at their center, to have a direct experience in such a way that newness of life takes place, just like it does for me, moment by moment. So that's my answer to that question.
I want to read your book.
So we're coming to the end of our share, writing A Labor of Love, and you may not know both of us. So how do we keep in touch with Roger?
So Roger Woolsey, there's a website, rogerwoolsey.com, ROGERWOLS like Sam, EY.com, and on there you can read various things that I'm up to. There's a page that describes the writing I've done in the new book project. That's where you can go to see when it's ultimately published and how you can buy it. The Kissing Fish fan page on Facebook already has a big following. That's the previous book that I wrote. And I'll certainly be mentioning the new book as it's getting ready to be published and how people can maybe pre-order and what have you. I'm still in the process of finishing the book. I want to send the completed manuscript to some publishers and get a contract in the next month or two if possible. So prayers as that happens. If you've got any connections or suggestions, I'm open to that, but it's going to hit the ground running. The previous book, again, already has a big following, so there's going to be an instant audience there, but even if you've not read the previous book, this book stands on its own. You don't have to have read the prior book to enjoy this book. And again, just rogerwoolsey.com. There's a contact me. You can send me an email, and we'll be in touch. How about you?
Thanks. Well, first let me respond that, is it KJ said we should write a book together. Maybe that'll come down the pike. We do really enjoy doing things collegially. We met on that round. Well, we met through an online dating, but discovered very quickly that wasn't the intention for our meeting, that we were really meant to be colleagues and mystics in the field that had complementary theologies, because we have very different formations, but can have great dialogues on those levels and really break things open. So thank you for that so much. Maybe that will come down the pike.
We have cheered each other on. I've spoken at the Wild Goose Festival. You've spoken at the Wild Goose Festival. I helped you sell your books, and there's been a lot of collaborative work over the years. So.
There has. When he was at CU Boulder, he let me offer things there and participated and brought all his wisdom and gifts as well. So we have kind of overlapped a lot over the past.
Yeah, there'll be more.
7 years.
Yeah.
7 years. So, it's super easy to get in touch with me, KimberlyBraun.com, KimberlyBraun.com. You will see everything I've got going there. You can join my newsletter list, which is the best way to keep in the loop of what's happening. And if you have interest earlier on, I have a lot that's brewing. So a couple retreats coming up. You could join me on those in the Yucatan Peninsula. I have online challenges that happen. In fact, I'm just gearing up to offer some free meditation challenges. So get on the newsletter and connect that way, and you will learn all about those different offerings, and we can stay friends. And I'm always happy to come to wherever you are. So if you're watching from a state that I don't live in and would like to bring me in to your center, to your community, to your friends group, I do things like that all the time. You can bring me in, and I'm happy to be of service to any topic you want. And I'm sure Roger would do the same thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining us. It's been really awesome to share with you. Because I don't do a lot of Facebook Live, let's see, I don't really know how to see if there's any question to answer. Okay. I'm going to trust,
Whoops.
that there are not questions to answer. I don't see any in the feed. So if you do have a question right now, type it in and I'll see it because my glasses are on, and we can answer that. Otherwise, I will download this and it'll be available on YouTube. So if you feel like watching it or sharing it with anybody, you want to share what Roger's doing or I'm doing, you can do it that way too. So I don't see any coming.
All right. Well, it's just been a delight to spend part of your Labor Day with you,
Yes.
whenever you watch this. And stay tuned, and we'll let you know when the books are ready to hit the road and be out in the world.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Bye-bye.